On September 6, 2025, deputies in Sumter County responded to a call of shots fired on Camp Branch Road. When they arrived just before midnight, they found 19-year-old Jamyah Jones lying outside a home. Emergency personnel attempted to save her, but she was pronounced dead at the scene.
For that update. Turning to a first alert this afternoon, one person dead following a shooting on Sunday night in Sumter County. It happened just before midnight Saturday on Camp Branch Road. Deputies arriving to find the victim, who has now been identified as 19-year-old Jamyah Jones from Hampton, Georgia, unresponsive. Jones was pronounced dead at the scene. The sheriff's office still investigating at this time. Meanwhile, anyone who has any information on this is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous. That number is 1-888-CRIME-SC.
Exactly 1 year earlier, on September 3rd, 2024, her younger brother, 16-year-old Javian Jones, was shot and killed in the same county. In his case, suspects were arrested and charged, with court proceedings still ongoing. In hers, no suspect had been publicly identified. Two siblings, both killed by gunfire in the span of 1 year, raise unresolved questions. Were the incidents connected, or was the timing only a coincidence? What led to each shooting, and who is responsible? Both investigations remain open, and the circumstances behind their deaths are still unclear. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Javian Jones was a 16-year-old teenager from Hampton, Georgia. He was described by those who knew him as bright and full of potential. On the evening of September 3rd, 2024, Javian was in Sumter County, South Carolina, specifically in the Dalzell community. He was traveling inside a vehicle with several other juveniles. At some point during the night, the vehicle came under gunfire. The shots tore into the car, striking Javian. He sustained fatal injuries and died as a result of the shooting. Another juvenile inside the vehicle was also wounded during the incident but survived. News of Javian's death traveled quickly. His passing shocked not only his hometown of Hampton, but also the Sumter community where the crime occurred. Both areas felt the impact of a violent incident involving someone so young. The investigation into Javian's death began immediately. Authorities identified and arrested multiple suspects. Among those arrested were Jonathan Brown and Henry Jaleel Brown. The charges filed against them ranged from murder to weapon possession. Law enforcement stated that the shooting was not a random act of violence. However, even with arrests and charges, details about the motive behind the attack were limited. The full story of why Javian was targeted remained unclear. The case moved into the legal system and continued through 2025, with proceedings still ongoing. For the Jones family, the death of their youngest child left a deep void. At the time of her death, Jamyah Jones was 19 years old. Like her brother, she was from Hampton, Georgia. She had recently celebrated her high school graduation. Friends and acquaintances describe her as charismatic and outgoing. She was known for her energy and her ability to draw people in socially. Her life shifted dramatically after Javian's murder in 2024. As his older sister, she took on the burden of grief in a very public way. On social media, she often posted tributes to her younger brother, recalling memories and expressing the depth of her loss. These posts gave insight into how heavily his death weighed on her daily life. Tragically, on September 6, 2025, Jamyah's own life came to an end in circumstances eerily close to the anniversary of her brother's killing. She was killed in Sumter County, South Carolina, the same county where Javian had died 1 year earlier. On the night of September 6, 2025, around 11:45 p.m., shots were fired in Sumter County. Deputies from the Sumter County Sheriff's Office responded to a location on Camp Branch Road. Upon arrival, they discovered a young woman lying unresponsive outside a residence. Emergency medical services attempted to save her. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later identified the victim as 19-year-old Jamyah Jones of Hampton, Georgia. The circumstances drew immediate attention because her death occurred only 3 days after the 1-year anniversary of her brother's murder in the same county. Sheriff Anthony Dennis of Sumter County called the shooting senseless violence. He confirmed that a homicide investigation was underway. Detectives canvassed the area for witnesses and evidence. Investigators also appealed to the public for information that could lead to identifying those responsible. At the time, no arrests were immediately reported in connection with Jamyah's killing. The sheriff's office kept many details confidential while the investigation continued. The coroner confirmed her cause of death as gunshot wounds.
For that update. Turning to a first alert this afternoon, one person dead following a shooting on Sunday night in Sumter County. It happened just before midnight Saturday on Camp Branch Road. Deputies arriving to find the victim, who has now been identified as 19-year-old Jamyah Jones from Hampton, Georgia, unresponsive. Jones was pronounced dead at the scene. The sheriff's office still investigating at this time. Meanwhile, anyone who has any information on this is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous. That number is 1-888-CRIME-SC. Meanwhile, a state trooper is recovering after being hit during a traffic stop over the weekend. This happening just after midnight Sunday morning. Investigators say Trooper Mitchell Williams Jr. was assisting with a traffic stop along I-77 northbound near mile marker 9. And that's when a truck ran off the road into the median, striking Williams with the driver's side mirror. The driver of the truck, later identified as 35-year-old Alex Bookert. He's charged with driving under the influence and was taken to the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. He was later released on bond.
The sheriff of Sumter County, Anthony Dennis, described the incident as an act of senseless violence. While his office confirmed that an investigation had been opened, officials withheld further details from the public. No immediate information was released concerning potential suspects, motives, or the events leading up to the shooting. This lack of details left questions surrounding the circumstances of Jamyah's final moments unanswered. Investigators canvassed the Camp Branch Road area to establish the sequence of events. Deputies sought out residents and potential eyewitnesses who may have heard or seen anything unusual in the area on the night of the shooting. According to the sheriff's office, efforts were also made to locate any possible surveillance footage from homes or nearby businesses that could provide leads. The rural setting of Camp Branch Road posed challenges, as such areas often have limited camera coverage compared to urban locations. In their public statements, authorities appealed directly to community members for assistance. The sheriff's office urged anyone with knowledge about the shooting to come forward and share information, either by contacting investigators directly or through anonymous tip lines. This outreach demonstrated law enforcement's reliance on community cooperation in order to piece together a clearer account of crime. Despite these efforts, by the days following Jamyah's death, no arrests had been reported. The case remained open and under investigation, with investigators continuing to review evidence and pursue leads. The absence of publicly named suspects left the situation unresolved and contributed to uncertainty surrounding the killing. Law enforcement maintained that they were working actively to identify the person or persons responsible, but no timeline was provided as to when results might be expected. The impact of the shooting extended beyond the investigative process. Jamyah's death carried added weight due to the fact that she was the second child in her family to be killed by gunfire in Sumter County within the span of a single year. Her younger brother, 16-year-old Javian Jones, had been shot and killed on September 3rd, 2024 in the Dalzell community, less than 15 miles from where Jamyah would later die. His case had resulted in arrests and pending legal proceedings, yet the family remained in mourning when Jamyah's death occurred. For the Jones family, the loss of a second child compounded the tragedy and raised broader questions regarding violence in the area. The family now faced a unique and devastating reality of having both of their children's lives cut short by gunfire within 12 months. Public records and reports confirmed the connection between the two siblings' deaths, making the case a subject of significant attention in both their hometown of Hampton, Georgia, and in Sumter County, South Carolina. Reactions to Jamyah's death quickly spread through social media platforms. Friends, peers, and extended relatives expressed their shock and grief in posts and comments. Many recalled her as a recent high school graduate, while others highlighted the closeness she had shared with her younger brother before his passing. These expressions, while personal in nature, also served to amplify awareness of the case in both local and regional circles. Beyond the immediate family, the community at large responded with concern. Residents of Sumter County noted the recurring nature of shootings involving young victims. The back-to-back deaths of Javian and Jamyah highlighted ongoing fears about the prevalence of firearms and the risk of violence. The case reinforced concerns about youth safety, nighttime gatherings, and the spread of violence across both rural and suburban parts of county. In both Georgia and South Carolina, organized vigils and memorials were held for Jamyah. In Hampton, Georgia, members of her high school community gathered to recognize her as a graduate whose life ended abruptly before she could move forward into adulthood. In Sumter County, candlelight vigils were staged near the site of the shooting, with attendees calling for justice and safer streets. These events provided spaces for the community to publicly acknowledge the loss and to call attention to the continuing issue of violence in the region. Media coverage reflected the seriousness of the case. Local news outlets published updates about the investigation, relayed statements from the sheriff's office, and documented the family connection between the two victims. Reporters emphasized the unusual and distressing detail that both siblings had been killed within a year of each other under similar circumstances. The coverage contributed to broader discussions about the nature of gun violence in South Carolina and its impact on families. The sheriff's office maintained its appeal for cooperation from the public. Authorities highlighted the importance of witnesses stepping forward in order to provide clarity. Officials acknowledged that without cooperation, investigations often stall due to limited direct evidence. As of the latest available reports, law enforcement had not disclosed any breakthroughs, and the case remained unresolved in terms of identifying a perpetrator. Gun violence has been a consistent issue in Sumter County, South Carolina, drawing increasing attention in recent years. Both urban neighborhoods and rural communities in the county have experienced fatal shootings that often involve youth and young adults. These incidents share certain characteristics: sudden escalations of violence, limited witness cooperation, and recurring cycles of retaliation. The deaths of siblings Javian and Jamyah Jones stand as two examples that reveal both the broader problem and the unresolved questions tied to these cases. Law enforcement data and local reports have shown that a significant portion of violent crime in Sumter County involves individuals under the age of 25. Many of the shootings reported in the county over the past 5 years have centered on disputes between young people, some linked to personal conflicts, others to group rivalries, and some with motives never disclosed publicly. Javian Jones, who was killed on September 3, 2024, was 16 years old at the time of his death. He was inside a vehicle with other juveniles when the car was struck by gunfire. His killing followed the pattern of youth-involved violence that has drawn concern from both the sheriff's office and the community. Arrests were eventually made in Javian's case, with teenage suspects facing charges including murder and weapon possession. This detail underscored that not only were victims young, but suspects were often of the same age group. 1 year later, on September 6, 2025, Javian's sister, 19-year-old Jamyah Jones, was shot and killed in Sumter County. She had only recently graduated from high school. Her death further reinforced the growing recognition that young adults, even those only just entering adulthood, were at the center of the ongoing cycle of violence. Shootings in Sumter County have not been restricted to urbanized neighborhoods. Many have taken place in residential areas on the outskirts of the city and in rural communities. Both Javian's and Jamyah's deaths occurred in such settings. Javian was killed in the Dalzell community, a semi-rural area in Sumter County, near the intersection of Black River Road and Edens Road. The location, though not heavily populated, became the site of gunfire directed at a vehicle carrying several teenagers. Jamyah's death occurred on Camp Branch Road, another area outside the city center. Deputies responded around 11:45 p.m. after reports of shots fired. She was found unresponsive outside a home, and emergency responders were unable to save her. These incidents follow a local pattern in which gun violence has extended beyond densely populated urban neighborhoods and into rural and suburban communities, challenging assumptions that shootings are isolated to specific districts. The spread of violence across different environments in Sumter County has made prevention and enforcement more complex. One of the most persistent challenges in resolving gun violence cases in Sumter County has been a lack of witness cooperation. Law enforcement officials, including Sheriff Anthony Dennis, have frequently noted that many shootings involve people who know each other, yet those with potential knowledge of the events are hesitant to speak with investigators. Fear of retaliation and mistrust of authorities often contribute to silence. In Javian's case, investigators did make arrests, indicating some degree of cooperation and evidence collection. However, even with suspects identified, public details about motive and circumstances were limited. Authorities did not publicly explain whether the shooting was a targeted attack or the result of an escalating conflict. In Jamyah's case, law enforcement described the shooting as senseless violence, but released no further information about possible suspects or motives in the days following her death. The sheriff's office issued calls for information in the public, highlighting again the reliance on witness cooperation to move investigations forward. Both deaths emphasized a larger issue. Gun violence investigations in Sumter County often stall or proceed slowly without strong witness testimony, while cycles of retaliation create new incidents. Each shooting can lead to another, fueled by silence, fear, and unresolved disputes. The killings of Javian and Jamyah Jones occurred a year apart, under different circumstances but within the same county. Both victims were young. Both deaths took place in rural residential areas, and both cases highlight the same ongoing concerns about safety in Sumter County. For community members, the deaths underscore the vulnerability of youth and young adults in the region. For law enforcement, they reinforce the difficulty of addressing gun violence without cooperation, clear motives, and preventative measures. Together, the cases symbolize the ongoing struggle to curb violence that continues to claim young lives in the county. While arrests were made in Javian's death, many details remain undisclosed. With Jamyah's case, even fewer facts have been made public, leaving critical questions unresolved. The timing of Jamyah's death, just 3 days after the 1-year anniversary of Javian's killing, raises the possibility of connection. Law enforcement has not stated whether the two cases are related. The lack of official confirmation leaves open the question of whether Jamyah was targeted because of her family's link to a previous case, or whether the deaths are coincidental. If not directly connected to her brother's case, Jamyah's death may have been tied to other factors. Retaliation remains a possibility, either linked to Javian's case or to other disputes involving individuals known to Jamyah. It may also have been unrelated, a separate act of violence without ties to her brother's killing. At this stage, the available facts do not establish one conclusion over another. No public reports have indicated whether Jamyah was threatened before the shooting. Without confirmation, investigators must still determine whether she faced intimidation, harassment, or warnings that could indicate premeditation. This question remains essential in understanding whether her death was random or deliberate. Authorities reported that Jamyah was found outside a home on Camp Branch Road, but they did not explain why she was there. The absence of information on whether she lived there, visited friends, or had another reason to be present leaves uncertainty about the circumstances leading to her death. Establishing her purpose for being at the location is key to reconstructing the sequence of events. Law enforcement has not identified suspects in Jamyah's case. Without arrests, it remains unclear whether those responsible are linked to known individuals or organized groups. This question is particularly significant if the case involves retaliation, as connections could extend beyond personal disputes to larger conflicts within the community. On September 3, 2024, 16-year-old Javian Jones was shot and killed in the Dalzell community of Sumter County, South Carolina. He had been inside a vehicle with other juveniles when gunfire struck the car. Javian died from his injuries, and another juvenile occupant was also wounded. The Sumter County Sheriff's Office immediately opened an investigation, treating the incident as a targeted shooting rather than random violence. Within days, investigators identified suspects. The first suspect arrested was Jonathan Brown, a teenager himself. He faced charges that included murder, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and attempted murder in connection to the second juvenile who survived the gunfire. Later, another suspect, identified as 22-year-old Henry Jaleel Brown, was also arrested. He faced similar charges, including murder and attempted murder. Law enforcement alleged that both suspects were directly involved in the shooting that claimed Javian's life. Court proceedings began in the months that followed. Both suspects were processed through bond hearings and preliminary court appearances. Records show the charges remain active into 2025. The timeline of trials, indictments, or plea arrangements had not been publicly disclosed at the time of later reporting. The case against the suspects remained in motion within the judicial system, but with no final outcomes available. The murder of Javian Jones established the Jones family as victims in a high-profile violent crime case. Yet while legal proceedings were underway, another tragedy was unfolding exactly 1 year later. On September 6, 2025, deputies responded to reports of shots fired on Camp Branch Road in Sumter County. When they arrived just before midnight, they discovered 19-year-old Jamyah Jones lying unresponsive outside a home. Emergency medical personnel attempted to resuscitate her, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The Sumter County Coroner's Office identified the victim as Jamyah Jones, the older sister of Javian. Authorities confirmed that she had died from gunshot wounds. Unlike her brother's case, where suspects were quickly identified and arrests were made, the investigation into Jamyah's death yielded no immediate arrests. Law enforcement labeled the incident as senseless violence, but did not provide specifics on potential suspects, motives, or circumstances leading to the shooting. Public appeals for information were issued by the sheriff's office. Deputies canvassed the neighborhood, seeking witnesses and any available surveillance footage. Despite these efforts, no official updates were made available in the initial aftermath. As of the first week following her death, no suspects have been publicly named or apprehended. The case entered the category of active and ongoing investigations, with minimal transparency provided to the public. The lack of information created uncertainty and speculation about whether Jamyah's killing was directly connected to her brother's case, or whether it was a separate act of violence. Both cases remain active in different ways. Javian's case had moved into the court system, with suspects identified and charged but awaiting trial. Jamyah's case, however, was in its earliest investigative stage, with no confirmed suspects or motives released. Law enforcement emphasized that both incidents represented examples of youth caught in violent encounters. Sheriff Anthony Dennis repeatedly described the shootings as senseless, while urging the community to come forward with any information. The absence of transparency in Jamyah's case left many questions unresolved, adding to the already complex situation surrounding the Jones family. The Jones family faced the loss of both children to gun violence in the span of 1 year and 3 days. Javian, the younger sibling, was taken first. Jamyah, the surviving child, died next under similar circumstances. This sequence placed the family in a devastating position, with no children left. The impact was noted by media outlets as an extreme and rare occurrence. One family losing 2 siblings to shootings in the same county, separated by exactly 1 year. The case quickly drew headlines across South Carolina and beyond. The connection between the 2 deaths was highlighted as a chilling coincidence that demanded closer examination. News coverage emphasized the timeline. Javian killed September 3, 2024, and Jamyah killed September 6, 2025. Media outlets also drew attention to the difference in outcomes between the 2 cases. Javian's case produced suspects and pending court proceedings. Jamyah's case, in contrast, provided no immediate answers. The public narrative became one of unresolved violence and the possibility of patterns that law enforcement had not publicly confirmed. Local community leaders and residents voiced concerns about the continuing cycle of shootings in Sumter County. Gun violence involving teenagers and young adults had already been a persistent issue in the region. The Jones family's losses became symbolic of this larger problem. Calls for prevention measures grew louder. Some emphasized the need for stronger intervention programs aimed at youth. Others pushed for broader accountability, both legally and socially, to prevent future shootings. The case also fueled concerns about safety in rural and residential areas of Sumter County. Both shootings occurred in relatively quiet parts of the county, intensifying fears that violence could reach any community, regardless of setting. Despite coverage and community reaction, multiple unanswered questions persisted. Was Jamyah's death related to Javian's case, or was it unrelated? Did Jamyah face threats in the months after her brother's murder? Why was she present on Camp Branch Road at the time of the shooting? Are the suspects from Javian's case connected in any way to Jamyah's killing? Will law enforcement release further updates, or will the case remain unsolved? These uncertainties added a layer of mystery to the narrative. They also left the community and the family with no closure. The story of Javian and Jamyah Jones stands out as one of the most striking examples of youth lost to gun violence in Sumter County. Javian, age 16, was killed in September 2024 in a shooting that produced arrests and pending court cases. Jamyah, age 19, was killed in September 2025, almost exactly 1 year later, with no suspects identified publicly at the time of reporting. Both siblings died in the same county, under violent circumstances, within 3 days of the same date on the calendar. The Jones family is left with no surviving children, placing them at the center of a tragedy that highlights broader systemic issues. The case raises questions about the effectiveness of prevention measures, the speed of investigations, and the accountability of those responsible. Community leaders continue to call for stronger efforts to address gun violence. Media coverage underscores the bitter coincidence of the two deaths. The community at large remains unsettled by the lack of resolution in Jamyah's case. The deaths of Javian and Jamyah Jones illustrate the persistence of unanswered questions, unresolved grief, and the urgent need for justice. Until both cases are fully concluded in the courts and through investigations, they remain open symbols of the challenges faced by families and communities impacted by gun violence. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.